What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today I am breaking down the top linebackers in the 2025 NFL Draft. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I've been taking a little bit of a hiatus. If you guys want to understand why, I did describe it in a community post, but the amount of support I've gotten from y'all has been amazing. I do apologize for the fact that, the videos have been a little bit more lacking, but obviously you guys have understood why. Getting back to my feet. We're going to do well. We're going to have a great time. Let's get right into this because this video I'm very excited to make because I actually haven't made a linebacker video in a very long time. And, I will just say if you were to basically not watch the rest of the video and you want a synopsis right now, I would say there's a lot of potential and there's one guy that I really, really love and one other guy that I really, really like. And the rest is very TBD. And even the guy who I really love is very TBD because he's never started. But we'll save those spoilers for the end. Of course, we're going to be talking about grading. So you guys should probably understand how I grade, right? Pretty obvious. Crazy, right? But essentially, rather than doing any form of comp, like basically saying a comp for somebody, if I ever have a comp, I'm just going to start saying it rather than listing it because you guys know it's very rare for me to give a comparison. At the end of the day, guys are guys. And if I think that there's some particularly transferable traits that makes me feel very similar, I'd rather just talk about it rather than have to force it for guys that I don't. So I do like the idea of a role a lot better. That role is going to consist of whether they're a coverage linebacker, whether they're a balanced, essentially a 3-down linebacker, maybe even an edge rusher. So those are basically the 3 different tiers if you're really thinking about it. But that's going to be one of the newer features for this group specifically, and I am going to start doing that for maybe some of the other positions as well. But included with this top, I think it is 11 linebackers, because the 12th guy, there's no all-22. We'll talk about him in a second. But there's also tiers, because I want you guys to understand the role that they'll be playing. Not just, whether they're coverage or a 3-down, but are they going to start? Are they somebody that should be in a rotation? Are they somebody who I just think should be developing and is an eventual starter? Or are they going to be someone who I think should be on the bench for the time being? Now, also based on that is a score out of 100, and that includes run support. This is pretty holistic category. It blends very well with IQ because a lot of times you got to be at the right place at the right time. So you're not going to see many guys who are very good in run support that have a really bad IQ grade, and we'll talk about that in a second. But essentially, it's how effective are you at stopping the run? Are you a secure tackler? But I take that a little bit more into account later. But essentially, do you look like you're comfortable versus the run? Pretty self-explanatory. IQ, that's how do you process the game. It's not saying someone's dumb. I mean, I could end up saying intelligence, which also makes them sound kind of dumb. But basically, play recognition, which is what it used to be. I just like the idea of IQ better because it's overall. And play recognition is pretty much at the snap. And, IQ is more over the entire play. So basically it's, do you know what's going on? Or do you kind of need a bit more time to process, which in the NFL, linebacker is probably the hardest position to play consistently well, which is why we see only a couple guys really succeeding and really excelling. Because it's just very difficult in the modern NFL to be a proficient linebacker because offenses are designed to confuse you, and only the best of the best can really maximize that capability. Pass rush as well. I do think that is a key aspect, and a lot of these guys who are more that edge rusher type will be getting graded much better in that category. Pursuit angles works hand in hand with run support, but there are some guys who are if they're in position, we'll talk about somebody very soon, Higgins, but spoiler alert, when he's in position, he's rock solid, but he just sometimes takes some angles that are just not great. So I do think that pursuit angles is going to be something that isn't fully encapsulated with many other things and allows you to see a new trait. Athleticism, self-explanatory. How fluid of an athlete are you? Do you have top-end speed? Do you have short area quickness? Do you have some strength? But strength is also relegated a little bit more towards hit power. Man coverage, unfortunately, putting coverage in there just looks awful, so I ended up saying man cover and zone cover. No one cares, but it's how you cover in man coverage and zone. And luckily, it's actually a pretty good class for it. Tackling, that's going to be almost primarily based on missed tackle percentage, which I do have a little bit of a tweak here and there for the players who I think maybe just, had a tougher schedule in terms of guys to tackle. And, some guys who had it easy and still did a poor job, I'll be able to knock them down a little bit more. And then, hit power, just talk about it's pretty much, do you transition contact well? Do you carry momentum? Do you, basically have a hit stick? And then it factor is if I feel like there's something like injuries or a poor motor or even a great motor that I didn't see before, or not that I didn't see before, but that I didn't encapsulate with any of my other categories, I'm allowed to basically manipulate the score a little bit as it checks and balances to my grading system. Dream fits are not too serious. Don't take them seriously. They're more there for fun than anything. More of a conversation piece rather than actual analysis. But let's get right into this. The one guy who I talked about earlier, no all-22, is Jason Henderson. Super excited to grade him. He actually is looked at as a top 100 player, but all these players are going to be graded with all-22. I am beginning to refuse to grade these players, especially at linebacker. I'm not even doing offensive and defensive line at this point without all 22. I've exclusively thrown out, I've pretty much explicitly thrown out all non-all 22 tape. And I have not made a single grade this entire year with anything that is not all 22. So I owed that to you guys. I think that that's important. So we're going to be waiting TBD on Jason Henderson, but I can guarantee you being sub 230 is not something I really love. But the rest of the traits seem to be awesome. I am not going to spoil myself or spoil my initial reaction by watching, normal game tape, because I do think that for the integrity of my analysis, I need to wait for all 22 until it gets to the point where we're in the regular season and maybe my all 22 sources don't have it. And that's when it's like, if I need to talk about somebody, I can stretch it a little bit. So let's get right into this. Abdul Carter is my number 11 linebacker. You'll see that he is great as an edge as well, significantly higher. So keep this in mind. This is just as a pure linebacker. He missed half of his, or not half, but a third of his tackles. That's atrocious. That's the reason he's down here. He got a 1 out of, or I think, yeah, he got a straight up 1 on his tackling grade, which is really bad. But as a pure linebacker, again, keep this in mind. I'm not putting him at this rank based on his edge rusher ranking. It is not 10 linebackers at 70.75 and above. And C is adequate. 70 is going to be that somebody who is that flex starter. So again, keep that in mind. But I didn't really love a lot of Abdul's game as much as I wanted to. I'm literally wearing a Penn State jersey with the number 11. It's Micah Parsons, not Abdul Carter, of course. But I did think that Abdul's a really good gap penetrator. I think he's going to transition very well to the edge rusher position. I had my doubts because I saw potential in him. He's an elite zone coverage linebacker. Just really feels the routes develop behind him. And if you're wondering how I grade that, I will be doing, I keep saying I will, and I promise I will. We're going to be doing those tape studies again on Discord. It's just a pain in the ass because I want to be able to record them and put them up for you guys instead of like going back over and over and over again with a full-time job as well. Not necessarily the easiest to go until 3 a.m. doing these, right? So especially with the live streams that Broshmo and I do every Friday, including this one. So feel free to come join us and have fun with us because, summer scouting is always fun to talk about. But regardless, basically zone coverage, a lot of this is based on feel. So, it's something that I felt very confident with my ability to analyze coverage ability over the past couple years. And, it's something that obviously I continue to work on, even if I see it as a strength of mine. But, when it comes to zone coverage, I really do have a strong sense for whether somebody feels comfortable in open space. And Abdul really did. I did love that about him. I do love the fact that he can play a real edge rusher position. In fact, he actually is the best when he's on the line of scrimmage or when he's in coverage. So I really do think this transition for a role for him is going to be great. I just also think that he needs to improve his tackling. I did see that he doesn't carry momentum very well. He's like, when you're talking about that impact of the line of scrimmage, I'm really hoping that that gets a little bit better. And it was when he was on the line of scrimmage compared to when he was a pure linebacker. But overall, Abdul Carter, again, you can tell that there's going to be a legitimate 2-tier jump for him from going linebacker up to edge rusher. He's going from a backup to an actual fringe edge rusher. that's awesome. So Abdul Carter's doing the right thing. I do think he's going to be fantastic. It's just as a pure linebacker, I wanted to toss this grade in because he did play pure linebacker last year. Jay Higgins is next. Talked about this one. At number 10, he's a very, very rock solid run stopping linebacker, but he is slow. He got outran by Drew Aller, and Drew Aller's not a slouch, right? It's not like he's going to be running in the 5-1, 5-2 territory. He's not that slow. But Jay Higgins as a linebacker needs to be able to either take the proper pursuit angle or be able to outrun a quarterback that's 250 pounds, especially when he's 233. Like, I thought that he was going to be 253 based on his movement skills. Was very, very unimpressed with that, I must admit. Some notes that I did have, because if you guys actually understand my notes, it's actually just live while I'm watching a game. I pretty much write my thoughts and then I give my grade. It's pretty straightforward, right? I don't really do reflective notes. So this is like literally live reactions to his games. I say he's a hard worker, but he's athletically limited. He cannot disengage from contact. So when he gets locked in, he does not block shed very well. I said his IQ is his primary asset. He took some poor angles, including one on a swing pass. I said he seems like a secure tackler when he is in position. But he was outsprinted by Drew Aller, and he's not very good in coverage. But the one thing for me is him in open space. He's so athletically limited, and then, his pursuit angles are very, very wish-washy. So he ended up actually, in that Penn State game that I'm referencing, those notes, he ended up missing a guy completely, complete whiff. So that's just not something that you can do when you don't have the athleticism to back it up. I am a little bit worried about that, but in terms of being somebody where you can just pretty much put him in case a lot of your guys get injured and you just want someone to be rock solid between the tackles, this is your guy. And he really does play larger than his size, but unfortunately is both in the good way as well as the bad way of him playing much bigger because, he just doesn't carry that athleticism. So unfortunate, but I do really like what he brings to the table. I think he is someone who's reliable, and I'm thinking of teams that bring that enforcer mentality that might want to take a swing on a linebacker. I really do like those dream fits. Next, we got Jon Borum, former Maryland linebacker, transferred to Michigan. Surprisingly, really good in coverage. He's not very agile. He does take some poor angles. I did notice that about him. Even in the box, I saw him take some angles, and I do think he was taking the right angle, just not for him. It was logical he was just going along the line of scrimmage essentially, but he just didn't have the athleticism to get to the hole in time, and the running back blew past him. So looking at the notes that I did have from when I was watching him, this is specifically the Ohio State notes I have. I said that he's able to evade blockers, but he has some poor angles. He's a bit stiff. He does have a nice transfer momentum. There's that hit power grade for you. I said he has good patience when in the box. His acceleration is the slow part. His zone coverage has been nice in show, but not always effective, which is probably why he doesn't have a super high zone grade. It's still really good, but I think that it looked a little bit better than it was. I said his man coverage is his best trait along with power. He will need to develop a lot, but he is in the good spot there in Michigan. So, there you go. That pretty much sums up everything. I do think that his athleticism really didn't. The fact that he did so well in run support, I think the fact that he realized some stuff late, takes some poor angles, and just doesn't have the athleticism to make up for it. He performed far better than what I would have given him credit for. And, zone coverage, man coverage, the fact is he can do everything. He's effective in every facet of the game, and that's honestly the most key. Run support, man coverage, and zone coverage, that right there is 35% of an entire grade that he did well in. And, athleticism's 10%, tackling's 5%. So his two weakest categories are 15, while his best in totality, including hit power, is 40. That's a good place to be in. So that's why I really love the foundation that he has there. And at 250 pounds, that's a Mike linebacker for you right there that can cover, that can handle the box as well. Hoping that he ends up maybe getting down to 240 and getting a little bit more of that juice going, because I really do love his game. He was one of the true freshmen that I highlighted a long time ago, so I'm excited to see him take that step up. Next, we got Jamon Dumis Johnson. Big fan of Jamon. He ended up dealing with some injuries last year, unfortunate. But this guy is a coverage linebacker to the T. I'll talk about some notes from my Florida game that I watched of his here, because I like doing a little bit. Like, honestly, feel free to let me know if you like this. I'm literally just going to quote one of my scouting reports, or like one of my games that I watched of them, like word for word, so you guys get to see how I was able to see this person like just unfold, right? Now, he does have over a 20% missed tackle rate. Keep that in mind. But he's somebody that, like, it was almost Nakobe Dean-esque in terms of the efficiency of pass rush and the ferocity. I did love Nakobe Dean a ton. And I do really like Jamon Dumis Johnson. Like, keep that in mind. He's a very fluid athlete. I do think that he has a limit on his top speed, which, again, once I dig into this, you'll see. But arguably one of the best coverage linebackers that I've studied. Like, this guy was pretty much running zig routes and, like doing all the fun stuff with running backs and, even some slot wide receivers, right? But ended up saying that he has very good mobility. He does have inconsistent picking up. So I said he did not identify a run. He's not very convicted, and he hesitates to commit to a decision, which leads to delayed and sometimes even wrong and delayed reactions. There's that IQ grade there for you. I said high-end man coverage skills. He said his coverage skills are a low-key elite, but I didn't see enough zone at that point, but so far it looked good. Ended up being pretty damn solid, right? But I said he's not a great run defender. He could be an asset in the pass rush. But I said I did not feel the crosser. Oh, there was a crosser with Ricky Pearsall that developed right behind him in zone coverage, and he didn't feel it. He was actually pointing out some other routes to Milton Jr, which we'll talk about eventually. Fun fact, he is higher than Jamon Dumis Johnson. But Jamon was a little bit more focused on directing Smale rather than actually focusing on Ricky Pearsall literally running behind him, which is why I did not give him a higher zone coverage grade, but I think that was the one big slip up that he did have. Regardless, I said he made a poor decision when he has poor decision making in the run game. I said what is interesting is that his top speed looks limited, but his short area quickness is very good. He ended up taking a poor angle on a swing pass that led to a big game, and he unfortunately dealt with some injuries. So, overall, that pretty much explains it. He's somebody that I do think is very role specific, but he is somebody who I really do like, which, 65.25 grade doesn't sound like it, but the fact is, I think he belongs on a roster and deserves development time. And at a 6'1", 245 frame, I think he does an excellent job, and he has the foundation to improve run support, to improve his tackling, and to improve his hit power just in terms of physics, right? I think he can be a lot more reliable, especially as a tackler, and that might boost his run support grade up a little bit more as well. So there's a lot of easy ways to improve that his physical body does not limit. And that's a big plus. And if he stays healthy, obviously you get that point back as well. Let's talk about Tyonte Powell. I don't know why I included him on this, but I just wanted to. This guy's a little bit of a sleeper. It's not like he's elite. Like, keep that in mind. He's not an elite player, but I ended up watching his worst game versus Michigan. He ended up dealing with some injuries over the year. I said he has good confidence and mobility. He ended up missing a tight end that released like when he was in man coverage, ended up being, a pretty big pass play, unfortunately. And I said he has good movement skills. He has tripped a couple of times, so there are some balance concerns there. I said he would like for him to transfer some more momentum. He ended up having a pressure, but it should have been a sack because he ended up taking a poor angle, which to me, that it's kind of key. I mean, the NFL quarterbacks are kind of used to guys getting in the backfield. You kind of need to make the most of it. So if you have an easy opportunity for a sack and then you just shank it because you don't take a good angle, I'm not going to be overly enthused about that. But then I ended up saying I want him to go through contact. This is the thing about a lot of linebackers and a lot of players in general. They kind of just go into contact and like remain there. So they're basically offensive players here, defensive players here. They kind of just meet and stay, right? What I want my players to do, whether it's offense or defense, right? And to be fair, they could cancel out, but this is not that type of case. Like, I will be giving guys credit for just being nasty players and having a really nasty battle, but I want offensive player to be here blocking, my linebacker, boom, move them, or get away from them, right? Like, just do one of the two. Your job is not to basically soak up a blocker. That's what the big chunky dudes on the line can do for you. Your job is to ensure that the running back does not have a clear lane. Like, watch where the running backs are going, but also disrupt what they're doing. And I think that's what the best linebackers can do. They're smart. They can identify what the play is going to be doing, and they're also going to be able to diagnose the best way to interrupt that play from, unfolding. What was interesting is that, I think Tyreem has the capabilities to be able to be a 3-down linebacker, but at the same time, the fact that he does have big slip-ups when he is in coverage, I'm not a fan of the range between his, average play, and then his floor and his ceiling. Like, I don't like that range that he has. It's a little bit too volatile for me. But Tyreem at 6'5", 240 is a great build. I wanted to watch a game where he literally had like a 33 grade, and he still did a very, very good job. I don't think he's like the best athlete on planet Earth. Like, I posted some Twitter clips as well, which you can go check out. But Tyreem, he's able to be patient, and I do appreciate that about him. This is going to piss some people off. At number 6, I have Harold Perkins Jr. Remember, this is the linebacker grade that has him here. He is my edge 2, which is not a surprise probably to anybody. So again, keep that in mind. I just don't really love him as a linebacker, right? So Harold Perkins is a fantastic player. I did just remember that. I gave him the 10 out of 10 in pass rush. I did give that to him because I think he is an elite edge rusher potential because he's 220 pounds, right? But he will be included in my edge rusher rankings. But since he does play linebacker, I wanted to include him in this as well. I think he's actually really good in coverage, as he should at 220 pounds. He's a good athlete, as he should at 220 pounds. But I don't think he has a completeness to his game. I really want him to be able to, I think he also has like a 25 plus or maybe even 28% missed tackle rate. It's pretty bad. But I want him to play similar to what I used to see Von Miller and Khalil Mack do, basically be an edge rusher that drops into zone quite a bit. And I think that he could end up really thriving in that. Same thing with Abdul Carter. I think they can both play very similar roles, which I guess is kind of funny because Abdul is 30 pounds heavier, right? But just some smaller notes from Harold Perkins' game versus Alabama. I said he feels like a pass rusher. He takes poor angles in open space, leading to missed tackles. He's unfortunately misidentified the play many times. And I said it's such a shame that he's so misused. He can't tackle to save his life. So it is unfortunate. Like, I didn't have a lot to really talk about Harold Perkins because I don't really think that there's a lot of noteworthiness to his actual linebacker game besides the fact that, like, he's really good in coverage and he's really good as a pass rusher. Unfortunately, I don't want a linebacker joining my squad to essentially be a glorified pass rusher that I can trust to drop into coverage. Like, that's not a role I want for my linebacker. That's a role I dream of for my edge rusher, to have that versatility. But I don't see that with Harold Perkins. And unfortunately, at 220 pounds, he has to go up in the weight. And even if I drop his athleticism to a B and maybe his pass rush to an A, and he's able to get that tackling up because he has a little bit more size to him, he has that hip power he can bring up, he can end up bringing up that run support grade a little bit more as well because of that. Like, I think that might end up being beneficial for him. And I think everybody would agree that him up at 235, even if it takes a little bit more of the juice away, which it shouldn't, 235 is still a light frame for an edge rusher. Like, you can be that large and still be very successful. I do think a lot of Harold Perkins. Someone who I really wanted to kind of toss in here is Colin Oliver, which I should have regraded him. I'll take that on the chin, but he's going to be on the deep dive anyways. I just put him as one of the edge rushers, which I should have done that with Harold Perkins too, but hey, here we are, right? But Harold Perkins overall is a fantastic player. Again, he's my number 2 edge rusher in the class. It's just when it comes to the overall game of a linebacker, I most heavily weight their ability to support the run, cover, as well as identify the play. That sounds pretty self-explanatory, but I do think that Harold does kind of suffer in two of the most key parts of the game, which is why he's at linebacker number 6. Linebacker number 5, we got a small tier jump here. Danny Stutzman. Danny's a fluid athlete, arguably the best athlete in the class. He's definitely probably the best coverage linebacker in the class, just in terms of pure balance. For me, I really did love a lot about Danny when they were not running the ball. I think Danny does not make the right decision very often, and when he does, it's delayed. That was the big thing for me. A lot of these linebackers, they are too delayed on their reaction timing to the point where you end up watching them be 5 steps behind. And luckily, Danny is fast enough to where he can make up for that in college. But the NFL, those 5 steps end up being 10. And those players who are getting those 10 steps ahead are 2 times as athletic as the guys you are facing in college. And they're also 10 times as talented. So that's where I really do end up having like such a strong opinion about certain linebackers when they can't have their run support, even when they're pretty much Danny Stutzman could be essentially a box safety, right? And at 241, I mean, hell, I would love to potentially see him get to 230 and then end up being potentially a safety. That is an option I could see actually working for Stutzman. But let's pull out some notes from him. Let's look at the Texas game here. I said he is physical. He takes a while to properly identify the play. He's a very fluid mover. He's quite solid in coverage. He ended up missing a sack. His in-box angles are not the best, but outside the box, he ends up taking better angles. I said I would like some more block shedding. He just tends to try to run through contact. So at least he tries to run through contact, but again, there needs to be a disengagement. A lot of edge rushers do this as well. They pretty much just run into the offensive player and stop it there. Use your ability to gain leverage when you push an offensive player on their heels. Disengage. They're worried about getting sat on their tush. You need to be worried about getting past them. And you can use that for your overall movement to be able to succeed versus the play, and that's what the best players end up doing. But, Danny Stutzman, I do have a lot of faith in his game. I just think he's really, really, really catering towards the more so box safety role, or maybe the Joker role, where he can utilize athleticism and that coverage ability to be a huge asset and lock down even slot receivers and a lot of tight ends at that big frame. Like, he could be a super weapon in the right hands. Problem is, I just think he's a little too role specific for just anybody. Let's talk about Deontay Lawson though. He was a fun one. He transitioned his number to 0 this year. That's going to be sick. I don't know if I love it over 32 because I don't know why. 32 has a good aura on him. Like, it really does work. But Deontay Lawson is a very, very fun linebacker to watch. Like, there's not really a part of his game that I don't like, apart from the fact that I think he has about a 20% missed tackle rate, which does suck. But again, we're going to read through my notes here because I mean, again, tell me if you like this. This is summer. It's time to be able to experiment and have some fun with some of this. So I ended up saying he pushed the running back into the quarterback while doing some pass rushing. He just swim moved a center. Is he possibly an edge guy as well? I don't think they will use him that, but I do think his zone coverage ability kind of makes him, or his overall coverage ability, I think he can end up working, as a pure linebacker. As the grade suggests, he's damn near a fringe starting linebacker right now. I said he can lose the ball carrier, but he's mostly on point. He has solid identification skills while he's in zone coverage. He's okay. Like I said, he has a good pass rush, but I ended up coming to the fact that he probably should be a pure linebacker. He needs to push the blocker back, which sometimes he does. It just needs to be more consistent. It seems like he ends up telling other players what to do, which is a big plus for me. I didn't see it enough to where I ended up giving him that +1 on it factor. But a lot of times when I see a linebacker being a true captain of a defense, I'm willing to give them some love and end up boosting their it factor a little bit, because those guys who really can control the game, they deserve a little extra love that I don't fully give them. But of course, that ends up fitting into IQ. But then he ended up getting tripped and he hurt. But I did feel confident that with those 40 reps versus Alabama, that was going to be one of the games that I wanted to see. So I thought he did a very, very, very good job. The fact is he can process routes developing behind him, and he's a good athlete. And not an elite athlete, but he's a good athlete. So I really love the balance that he brings to the game. I think in time his IQ will improve, and maybe with being able to recognize things at a higher rate, he can maybe take those good pursuit angles and end up making better tackles with better timing. Let's talk about Milton Jr. He ended up getting ditched by Jamon Dumis Johnson, but we'll end up quoting that same game Georgia or that same game versus Florida, because I do love seeing similarly graded similar games to other players on the same team, because it's cool to see how they interact, because I already know how the other player is playing, right? But Smale is like perfectly balanced. He has really good short area quickness, but he's really top speed limited. I don't know what's up with that, but I do think that he's somebody that you can rely on in full coverage. Like, you could put him versus a linebacker, or put him versus a tight end. You could put him versus a slot. He ended up playing against Ricky Pearsall this game, which really did pop off the athleticism notes. Like, that's why I was like, yeah, Ricky is gaining separation in both quickness as well, but more primarily that long speed than versus running backs too. But he's one of those guys. I think he has 7% missed tackle rate, which is very, very solid. Nothing super special, but very good, right? Like, there's just nothing about him that is bad. Remember, C is adequate, right? So looking at my notes of his, I said he's overall been iffy with his run defense decisions, which is why his IQ grade's not that great. He has some power. He ended up having a great stop on 4th down. He said it hasn't been bad necessarily in coverage, but I have yet to be impressed. But it was versus Pearsall, which as time progressed, I realized that it was more of the athleticism than the actual ability. But over the game, I ended up saying that his coverage improved and he started to impress. I thought he was so well-rounded, just with some top speed limitations. Again, someone who I do really trust in all facets of the game. You'll see the top 4 linebackers will all have a balanced role. Not because I made it that way, but I'm very grateful that it ended up being that way. It makes me a lot more confident in my overall analysis and my overall grading scale, because I think that it's worth it to continue to retool grading systems if they don't reward players who can play every down as people who can be starters, right? So I am very happy with what happened there. But this is the player I really like, Barrett Carter. Barrett's a fun player, man. He is athletic. He is surprisingly really smart versus the run. I do think he chooses the wrong hole sometimes, and we'll get into one of the games I graded of his as well. I do think he's not a bad pass rusher, but I kind of think he overuses his athleticism. He has over 20% missed tackle rate. It is what it is, but he's somebody that improved over the year, and I really do love players that continue to improve and perform well versus even the tougher teams. So I ended up grading this game versus Notre Dame, which was his worst graded game. So I'll give you my notes from that one. I said he's a little late getting to the right hole versus the run, but he does end up getting there. He's a very good athlete. He's chosen the wrong hole a couple of times, but he ends up being in the right area. He focuses on the ball through contact. Remember when I was talking about basically guys getting absorbed by contact and like not actually knowing how to affect the play? Barrett Carter is such a high run support grade because even when he's engaged with a blocker, he's looking beyond them at the play that's developing. And what that does, even if you can't get off the block, maybe you can get the block in the way of the running back, right? Maybe you can get the block in the way of the receiver, the way of the ball carrier, and that can affect the play. Or maybe you see that a hole is developing and you can just make the hole a little bit smaller, so it might be able to help another player get the right angle. There's things like that I think are very minute. Maybe it's over analysis, but I do think that it is something to work on, or something to note, and Barrett Carter does that very well. I say he's not a shedder or an impact defender, like I was talking about, getting off of those blocks, but he can pull off of them, so he can disengage away. Not a big fan of that, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And when I'm talking about momentum through contact, there's that hip power grade coming in to fruition for you. I said he has some good flashes of zone coverage in general. I mean, athleticism usually is pretty hand in hand with man coverage ability. It's kind of hard to find a guy who's a good athlete who sucks at man coverage, because running backs are not necessarily going to be elite route runners, so you should kind of be able to cover them. But anywho, I said that he has good patience. He ended up having good patience on a wide zone, which I think I posted on my X as well. But he did mistime the tackle, leading to a broken tackle. So he was pretty much used as the guy who was in man coverage versus the running back, whether he was in the slot, on the boundary, or behind the line of scrimmage at the normal positions. So I do love that about him. I said his IQ is not bad, but it does end up fluctuating. I said he's assertive and he varies his speed throughout the play. Something that's an easy way to get me to love you. Don't be the same speed the whole play. I'll get bored of watching you, just be honest. But more importantly, if the offense can't fully track where you're going to be because they don't know what speed you're going to be going, it makes it that much more difficult to actually properly plan out how to beat you. And I really do love that about Barrett Carter. I mean, he might end up going top 32. It's just tough to say linebackers will be going that high when I don't see enough development with high missed tackle rates, right? Regardless, I said he got beaten by a zig route, which is why he also doesn't have a B+ in man. He's at his best when he's assertive but patient. So I do think he ends up, there might be here and there a lack of confidence after a poor rep where he misses a tackle, and he ends up really showing out when he's willing to maybe take that extra second drifting into the right position, but then really push himself into a difference-making position. I really do love that about him. I said he sometimes goes kamikaze, and that's where mistakes happen. So remember when I said patient but assertive? When he's assertive and not patient, that's where he sometimes makes the wrong mistake. I will say he is a bit stiffer in space than expected, but I ended up basically comping him to Edgerrin Cooper with a little less agility and a little bit worse of a pass rusher. But if you guys did track, Edgerrin Cooper's grade until the end of the draft cycle, he ended up being a 78. So yeah, really did end up liking him. And then, yeah, he had a 20% missed tackle rate. For me, I want that under 10% for my linebackers. Again, I think it's because he goes kamikaze sometimes and just like, he sees red, he just goes, you guys know what a kamikaze fighter is. Like you're just going balls to the wall, like no regard. And Barrett can do that. But next and finally is Jack Kaiser, one of the guys who I debated watching. I love when it ends up being like this. I was having a lot of doubts. I was like, damn, like linebacker grades are going to be kind of crap. And ended up falling in love with Jack Kaiser. I think he has some stub-ass arms. I will say that. His arms look short as hell. That was one of the reasons I ended up doing a 1-, by the way. It was that combined with the fact he's not started. But Jack Kaiser, I'll get into one of the games I graded for him as well, of course. We got to do it. It's versus Clemson. But, I mean, one of the most talented linebackers that I've ever seen that has not started a game. Like, it is honestly awesome. And the thing I love the most about Jack, he thrives in the red zone. He's like the opposite of Connor Wigman. Connor Wigman ends up, the quarterback for Texas A&M, he ends up like crumbling in the red zone in terms of his decision making. Jack Kaiser was the reason these guys were able to have a chance in the red zone. Fantastic. But let's get into my notes of the game. So this is even more to the fact that I love Jack Kaiser. The first play I watched of him versus Clemson, he went the completely wrong way versus the run. I was like, oh, here we go. I said he's a good athlete, but short arms. He flashed zone awareness of a route developing behind him. It was on the goal line. He didn't end up making the play, but he ended up feeling it, which to me shows the foundation, which over the game, I felt very comfortable with his zone coverage ability. I said he has some nice open field tackles. He ended up having some get slipped out, like somebody slipped out of a tackle, but I do think that, it's more the exception, not the rule. I said he has safety-like movement, but his top speed is a little bit limited. I say he's an asset in the red zone. He said nice job tackling in space multiple times, showing that he corrected himself. Another reason for another +1 there. So red zone asset, and then someone who can learn from his mistakes. That's why I ended up loving Joey Porter Jr. When I watched him versus Charlie Jones, who ate him for lunch, I ended up watching Joey Porter Jr., learn on the fly and end up making the game-winning play. Love that as well. And I said, dude is great on the line of scrimmage as well. So this guy, I mean, he's 6'2", 232. He can play up to 200. He's pretty much playing at 240, essentially, in terms of his overall emphasis and impact on the game. But somebody where when quick decision-making is key, he's going to be right there. When long-term processing, like being in zone coverage, is key, he's on point. And to me, that is perfect balance. That's somebody who's almost an elite level linebacker. We're going to need to see a lot more from him. And this is obviously very TBD on him getting starting reps and being able to play at that level. At the end of the day, he was behind 2 linebackers I was not a big fan of, which is a little bit concerning to me. But at the same time, those guys are done. J.D. Bertrand is gone, as well as Maurice Lufau. Jack Kaiser's time is here. We'll see if this ends up being the impact he has when he's a full-time starter. I'm very excited for it, and I think you should be too. Thank you so much for watching. I love you. See you on the far side. Peace.